All right, let's go ahead and kick things off. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today. We are super excited to have you here. If you haven't met me, I'm Mackenzie Manus. I'm our Director of Channel Development here at Epic.io. I am super excited to be joined by Colin Greer, who's one of our AIoT sales directors, and Bo Barker, who is one of our senior solutions engineers. So we're going to be diving in today, enhancing energy operations and Epic.io's smart solutions for utilities. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in and just give a little bit of an overview of who we are here at Epic in case you're not familiar. And then I will pass it over to them to dive into all the fun stuff. So if you're not familiar with Epic.io, Epic.io is now 3 companies that have come together. So you have BroadSky, who's been focusing on wireless connectivity for over 20 years, and then IntelliSite, who's been focusing on AI and IoT for as well about 20 years. And so in 2020, our CEO, Ken Mills, saw kind of an opportunity to sell what we like to call an end-to-end or an integrated solution that really brings all those components of AI and IoT, as well as that internet and network connectivity, all into one kind of pizza, as we like to call it. So this is just a quick overview of some of the partners that we work with, as well as some of the awards we've won over the last few years of just kind of a high level of who we are here at Epic. And then we also just a few weeks ago acquired another company called 2020 Solutions, but I'm going to let Colin cover that in just a couple of minutes. So just really quickly, just to kind of give you a snapshot, our whole mission at Epic.io is to create a safer, smarter, and more connected world. So we have over 1,800 customers globally and over 36,000 connected devices. And those are kind of all the things that we do to really implement that safer, smarter, and more connected world. So as I mentioned, we just recently acquired a new company, 2020 Solutions, which we are very excited about. And I am going to pass it over to Colin to kind of talk a little bit more about that and jump right in.
Awesome. Thanks, Mackenzie. Well, certainly pleasure to have you guys on today. Thank you again for joining. Some of those may be familiar with myself from the 2020 days. As Mackenzie mentioned, roughly about 4 weeks ago. So 2020 Solutions was acquired by Epic. Really, we both had a ton of synergies, right? Epic brings a ton of different AI aspects to the table. The connectivity piece, as many of you all know today. From the 2020 side of the table, we bring a really robust platform that we're excited to talk about today a little bit, as well as some operational and other technology that Epic didn't have. So really, a lot of similar customers as far as our backgrounds go. We'll talk a little bit about more of that in the next slide, as far as kind of where those partnerships and synergies kind of aligned in that regard. Kenzie, I'll have you jump over to the next one. Perfect.
Sorry, my computer froze on me for a sec.
All good, all good. Bo, I'll let you jump on this one for a minute, and we can kind of jump together on this as we look to talk about the two different companies. Hey, Bo, I think you might still be on mute.
Sure enough. Thanks, Colin. Story of my life. Yeah, it's really exciting, in the course of Epic's history, that the acquisition of companies and kind of bringing all of these cutting edge technologies together. So we were really excited to hear and this unique partnership, the kind of additional features, additional technology stack, additional reach into the market that came about recently from 2020 and Epic.io coming together as a single company. So we really kind of stand at the forefront of technology innovation. We're constantly innovating, leveraging new technologies, particularly around our AI and IoT solutions, as well as some of the connectivity solutions that are coming to market today. And we have just an excellent group of folks as we bring everyone together. Like we were saying, we are better together, and all of this experience and dedication to technology, to customer success, all of those things sort of come together as a cultural fit, but also, net is our delivery to our clients by bringing all the kind of, the smart people together in a room and saying, this is what we need to do to address certain challenges in the space or create different solutions. Maybe that's just, at a level of modifying an existing solution to meet a new demand or a new kind of concept. So we're really an outcomes-based, a kind of a solution engineering, outcomes-based company where we want to perform those discovery calls. We want to really understand what it is that we're aiming for so that we come to those positive business outcomes and generate meaningful data. There's a lot of AI and IoT applications out there today that generate a ton of data, but then at the end of the day, you have to be able to see that. It has to be visualized. It has to mean something impactful to the business besides just massive data sets. So bringing that together. Growing our support infrastructure. How do we support post sales? How do we support what we're doing today? And as we kind of team together, we're bringing that level of expertise into the mix as well. And then just some of the across our shared portfolios. So, as 2020 came into Epic IO, we found we have a lot of shared customers in the space, and we were doing different things with those customers. So now, not only do our customers, our clients benefit from that single source billing, just from an expense management perspective, but also it's opening up these other possibilities that maybe we didn't have as individual companies, solutions to present. And I think there's some really unique solutions that we'll talk about today. Colin's got some really great target points there. But then just, kind of that vertical focus. Energy in general is a really big focus for Epic IO this year, from top down. And we really want to expand in that space more than we have historically even, and really kind of bring the full suite of solutions to the market. So just kind of briefly covering this, we have a lot of material to go through, and I appreciate Colin kind of letting me open with this one. Colin, do you have anything to add? Anything that I missed on why we are better together?
No, Bo, I think you hit, so many of the points right on the head as far as a lot of our synergies, our existing customer bases. Really, both of the organizations come from a background of remote, tough to deploy locations, right? Whether that be a substation, a laydown yard, a temporary stand-up construction site for that matter, right? Where we may not have that connectivity, we may not have that power, but we want a connected solution, maybe even a single pane of glass type platform for viewing all of our operations, right? And so as we kind of blend those two organizations together, we're going to be able to do that even more so, leveraging kind of the strengths of both organizations in a really harmonious way.
It's awesome.
So with that said, I think we'll jump right into it. Obviously a lot of what we're talking about today is, focused primarily in the utility space, right? What are some of those smart solutions that we're going to be able to bring to the table? Before we go, dive into that, I kind of want to take a step back for a second and look at kind of where we're at as a utility space in general when it relates to security. Mackenzie, if you want to jump forward one slide. So, kind of looking at some of the data from the DOE, right, in terms of where we're at from a standpoint of challenges that our critical infrastructure is starting to see. You can see just from the statistics, let alone needing to go with any percentages, that those numbers are increasing, and frankly, increasing at a pretty rapid rate. Right, just looking back from 2021 to 2023, we're 2x the amount of critical incidences happening at monitored and regulated critical infrastructure. Our monitoring team that we have on our own side, our SOC, is seeing very similar trends as well, as far as the amount of breaches, as the amount of thefts and vandalism and just incidences happening at these critical infrastructure locations. So, as we're seeing over time, we're projecting that it's going to not only increase, but increase in multiple folds as well. If you see kind of on the next slide, we're on pace already, even though we're in the first quarter of the year, to be at roughly 275 plus attacks on critical infrastructure, through the end of 2024. Right, that would again put us at a 60% increase from 2022. And so, from that standpoint, it's really kind of alarming to think about how many of our existing locations today, especially those that are critical for our operations, are, most of them today are in a capacity that are unprotected, right? And so we see some of the incidences that have happened, kind of across the country. You look at North Carolina, look at some incidences from, say, Colorado or up in Washington or even Texas for that matter. And these are real incidences that have happened and had major impacts to organizations and unfortunately their customers as well. So I'll let you jump in on this one here.
Awesome. Yeah. So, when we're talking about the grid and some of the types of threats, there's obviously the electronic threats, but then there are this plethora of physical threats that can impact serviceability. So obviously theft is one. If someone's out there trying to, copper theft was huge. These large transmission lines and some of the components have resale value in the black market, I guess. I don't know. I'm not involved in that. So we have people going out, and stealing things. They're taking critical infrastructure components and cabling and things like that from sites, ripping things out of the ground, doing things like sabotage. Sabotaging the all kinds of things that can be done inside. I personally wouldn't walk into a high-powered facility like that and try to touch anything, but it amazes me what folks do to be malicious. And so, sabotaging some of this equipment and really, not only does that take down the infrastructure, but it presents a life safety threat to the employees who are out there servicing it. So that is the bigger picture there. We want to make sure that the employees who are visiting on site are safe, and that they're able to do their jobs and maintain the grids, the power, the things that we all use and consume every day. Gunshots, gunfire, as you can imagine, you see those larger kind of cans. Some of these transformers have oil in them to help cool. And shooting it with a gun will drain the oil out. It can catch on fire. Then you have a fire risk, not to mention just the actual damage. So this was one that I saw in my years of going out to various tower sites. People just shoot up these locations for no apparent reason, and it causes massive damage. And again, the folks that are going out there, they have to shut things down. It's unsafe for them, because of the damage to the equipment. It can be unsafe. Those kinds of things. So really, how do we look at that as a detection mechanism and prevention mechanism when it comes to gunshots? And then vandalism, just, general damage to the property that may not be service impacting or life safety impacting, but does have a cost to the business, to the operator, and repainting buildings and cleaning things up and all of that. And the one that really surprised me as I at least came out and started to look at some of the sites and things like that, and it makes a lot of sense. Animals like birds landing on certain points of the system, if they're on a line or they bridge a connection, it can cause damage to the infrastructure by that electrical arcing. And unfortunately for the little bird, he didn't know, but birds will land on this equipment sometimes and cause that kind of damage, or their nesting behaviors will create materials that can catch on fire and those things. And then snakes was, I'm in an area where we have rattlesnakes. Going on site and having rattlesnakes, poisonous venomous snakes, I should say, on site. That again, that's a personnel life safety issue, as well as they get into places that you wouldn't expect them to be necessarily, and you open up the door to maybe a control shed or some infrastructure there, and you have something that you didn't know about. And again, getting into rodents, those kinds of things, getting into the systems, getting into the wiring, just causing issues. And I was really surprised at the metric there on how wildlife can impact some of the service sites. So super interesting. But those are kind of I guess a high-level list of things that we see as threats to this infrastructure from a physical perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Bo. I actually had a customer recently, ask about if we can detect on, specifically on birds, right? And
right.
They had an exact incident just like that, where one landed on top of a transformer and flapped its wings a little bit too wide, and became a nice little dinner for for the local folks out there. But unfortunately took out the entirety of the substation as well, right? Which was a huge impact to the customers, impact to the operations, and obviously was costly. So, as we look at other costs, right? Obviously, there's the upfront cost, right? There's the operational disruptions or the equipment cost of the repair, right? But there's a lot of other aspects of costs, right? Whether that's safety, whether that is increasing future costs, or even reputational damage, right? Some of the biggest impacts we're seeing now are hardly even from the actual event itself, but from the social media impact after the fact, right? Nowadays you have people who are out there to get big organizations. You look at some of the big oil and gas companies that are targeted every day from just a social media standpoint, trying to create hype as if these organizations are out to get us. And so having these types of incidences where we're all of a sudden getting a ton of media attention for an incident that was out of our control, can be just as damaging as, frankly, the loss of a substation or a transformer itself. Obviously the financial impact can be huge for both sides of the picture there. As we look at safety, right, one of the things that we'll talk a little bit about today here in a minute is ways that we can use technology that is traditionally used for security, but use it for other areas of our operations that we may not think about all the time, right? One of the great benefits of what Epic, coming from the 2020 side, brought to the table is that ability to do a lot more with the cameras that are on site, pick up on maybe posture detection, right? Has somebody fallen over? We'll talk about that here in a little bit, right? And so as we look at safety concerns as well, our employees are obviously irreplaceable, right? We can always replace equipment, albeit expensive and albeit a long lead time. We can't replace employees though. And so obviously, as we look at ways to integrate some of this technology into our locations, if we can also enable it to help with our employee safety and help with some of our operational items as well, that can make it a lot more palpable to kind of put in a mass deployment way. For those that are obviously selling power or selling water, or have customers right on the back end, right? We're all kind of customer driven in some capacity. Trying to prevent those future cost increases is a huge aspect. Obviously, I know for a lot of our cooperative friends on the call, that's a big topic kind of on a regular annual basis, right? Are we going to have to push more cost increases to our members? And ultimately, we're trying to not do that. There's a reality in which, though, unfortunately, sometimes that has to happen. But if we can prove that we're trying to do everything in our power to minimize that, it can certainly help the way that our members and our customers kind of view the organization. So kind of where do we go from here, right? As we've talked a little bit about where we're at in the standpoint of the market, of the challenges that we're seeing, and then as we look to say, okay, what are some of the practices that we can ensure from here on out that are going to help us take a look at some ways to deploy this type of technology to help improve what we've talked about previously, right? Or ideally prevent in some capacities as well. So 4 main topics we'll talk about today are going to be a cloud edge platform, right? That gives us kind of that visibility across all of our sites. We really like to use the word single pane of glass. So that could not just be for cameras, could be for a variety of IoT sensors, could be for operational tracking and data management as well. So having a singular place where for easy to use ability for monitoring sites, for proactively monitoring sites, for taking action on those sites as well, and proactive notification is a huge ability for us to have that kind of visibility. We wouldn't be able to have that type of visibility without a robust and secure network, right? Coming from the other half of Epic IO is our connectivity piece, and so being able to take out to those locations a robust and secure network where we may not have fiber at today, right? We have a lot of remote locations today that just don't have the robust network that we would like them to have. And so being able to put us on a private cellular network or a business network that is just as secure, if not more, than our traditional commercial network gives us a lot of opportunity to kind of have that off-grid all of a sudden be blended into our on-grid. ASLI, active shooter location identification. Kind of a mouthful, but we'll talk about it a little bit more. It's essentially an enhanced form of gunshot detection. There's a lot of different discussion around gunshot detection right now and what that means for us in the utility space, right? We obviously mentioned earlier the North Carolina incident, among a lot of other incidences that have related to gunshot events. And they may not be massive ones that we hear about on the news, but it could just be a, some meddling kids that have a shotgun and want to go ring some noise off of the substation infrastructure, right? That can be just as damaging as a targeted attack from somebody 1,500 yards out. And then finally talk about remote monitoring and what a rules engine looks like for us. How can we take some of this equipment and technology that we have in the field and use it proactively to actually help us secure our sites without having to be reactive in nature? So we'll jump into the Cloud Edge platform, right, and what that kind of looks like. So really the goal of this, as mentioned earlier, is to provide a single pane of glass. The idea is that I'm going to be able to log into a single, type of platform and be able to take a look at all of my cameras, all of my sensors, all of my data in a meaningful and tactful manner, right? That could be alerts from security. It could be alerts from temperature of a piece of equipment overheating. Being able to do that in a manner that brings it all into a single pane is huge, but then also have the back end that allows us to do a lot of edge analytics as well. That way we're not overloading networks by any stretch, right? One of the biggest concerns that I hear about from customers is, I would love to put cameras on my network, but it's going to bog my network down. I can't afford to put a camera at a substation because I'm only working with 3 megabits of data back to my head office, and I need that for my SCADA system. That's fantastic, and I don't disagree that is a limiting factor. The beauty of some of this technology, though, is that we don't need to have a massive fiber network to be able to deploy this type of technology out at the edge. So that flexibility of kind of having a cloud and an edge-based type system gives us that ability to still have that single pane of glass, but without the need for that robust, traditional on-grid type network that you would see maybe at a traditional building or campus. So what would that maybe look like in practice in terms of, how we've deployed this for some of our customers today, right? So this kind of example here is deploying a mixture of IoT sensors and video surveillance in a meaningful manner that allowed us to deploy across an entire state and get us eyes on locations that traditionally was having to be done by somebody driving around state by state to check on these sites. So we were able to put up cameras, connectivity, and sensors at sites that were traditionally not ever even viewed as an option to put that type of technology at. We had again two different employees that were dedicated to driving around, taking a look at these sites, and obviously the windshield time, some of the most dangerous times, for our day-to-day operations, right? So we've minimized, drive time that these employees are having to make, right? That's going to be on the HSE side a huge uplift. Obviously, being able to make more meaningful decisions for our operations. Do I need to go ahead and dump out these bins ahead of time? Can I be more proactive in scheduling trucks ahead of time? So again, the idea here is that cameras are no longer just a piece of hardware that sit out there and do some recording, and we go back and look at footage 30 days after an incident and be like, yep, that guy actually did take my copper. We're able to be proactive in our manners for monitoring security, but also use those cameras for way more things than simply just monitoring if somebody's accessing our sites after hours.
So I was going to talk a little bit about the main focus here is on the solution, and part of that solution is the underlying connectivity, and we've really designed it around this what we call the gold standard in connectivity. So it starts off with those engineered outcomes in that discovery phase of learning what the need is, how we're going to engineer for it, service, deploy, et cetera. So a really chained sort of process-driven approach things like best carrier selection. So we use an extensive set of tools when we're looking at, say, for example, the LTE carriers, AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile in the US. We're using this database and all of our historical information to make best carrier selection determinations from that data. And it's amazing to me how much different the carriers are, even not across large geographies, but even in smaller geographies, like city blocks, for example, if you're in an MSA or a city, and rurally, maybe who performs better from a rural perspective in a given area. So that carrier selection component falls into just quality of service. We have to select the best one for that given site, and we do that every single time we're qualifying a site that has, for example, a 4G or a 5G device deployed with it. We also are direct with the carriers themselves. And so Colin mentioned, the private cellular networking. There are different levels of networking when it comes to cellular. I would say probably the one that we're all most common with as consumers is the public cellular network. And on the public cellular network, me as a consumer on my personal account, I receive a lower priority than I do if I'm on a business account. So businesses have a higher priority QoS or QCI in terms of LTE on the network. The other part of it is with that direct carrier relationship, we're not sitting in the middle of that data traffic. So I think that's really important because there are some services out there that shunt the data traffic from the cell carrier's network through their own core data network or center. And you can create a single point of failure from that. And it's also difficult when you come into regulatory compliance type of conversations that really is pictured and exists as a man in the middle. So we don't sit in the middle of the network. We will help secure it, but we're using the resources of those carriers directly and not funneling that through. We are taking data for our analytics platforms and our IoT platforms. That goes to us. But as far as the data streams go and who that's connected to is direct with the carrier. And then there's mobile private networking. So carving off private space on the public networks is another thing that we do for the energy sector fairly often. That's a request, and that means that the data traffic sort of stops at the carrier's core network, and from there it's cross-connected through VPN or some kind of network-to-network interface to your data centers, to your customers' data centers, those kinds of things. And then there's private LTE, or what used to be termed as CBRS or PCN. And that's creating your own cellular network in a given locale. So, as we saw earlier in the picture, we saw, I think, a lot of devices deployed in maybe, I think it looked like the Permian Basin. So the ability to broadcast our own private network in those areas, and then maybe drive that backhaul off of something like Starlink and or LTE from that perspective. So a lot of different combinations that we can get to there. But it really, these things coupled with the management, the process management, the project management that goes into it, the hardware, the class and carrier we're using, all come together to create that gold standard. And we've been doing this for a long time, and we're very, very good at making those determinations on behalf of our clients and customers. So I think that's really kind of what I had for this slide. I think, Colin, on a high level, as we talk about some of the value-added features in the connectivity, there is the backup wireless internet. We do offer installation. So we have contracted field technicians and staff technicians that go out and do installation work in the field. Again, I mentioned the dedicated project management. I think that's a really critical component. Having a single person to contact who then marshals resources, schedules those calls, those kinds of things. Having that dedicated project manager is really important as you roll out to enterprise and basically the business sectors. Just that single point of contact again. 24/7 customer support. I won't go deep into that. Some companies do, some companies don't. We've obviously opted to have round-the-clock support. Makes sense. And then that centralized connectivity management and single pane of glass, I will sort of lump those together. That's kind of a crucial element. No one wants to go to 10 different platforms to acquire the data that they need to make one decision. So having that kind of centralized and single pane of glass for monitoring, control, all of those things really makes it ease of use and just a more efficient system and operation. And then we do have options for what we call unbreakable internet, which is layering in multiple WAN sources in an SD-WAN environment. Things like WAN smoothing and forward error correction are built into that. Obviously, traffic steering as you would have with any other SD-WAN, but really packet replication so that if one WAN interface goes down, if one connection goes down, all of that traffic immediately flows over to another connection or maybe a tertiary connection as well. So keeping that connectivity maintained so that these kinds of things that we're talking about, the solutions that we're talking about, computer vision, gunshot detection, all of these things are driven by the underlying connectivity. So it's very important to us that that is a robust connectivity solution that we're deploying so that information can be acted upon from the field. So all in all, it's a lot of different programs and processes that we put in place to really create this gold standard and add value as we are MSPing and serving our customer base.
Yeah, but one thing I'd like to add in that regard as it relates to the 24/7 monitoring, the 24/7 support is that a lot of times I think people think maybe that just extends to the cellular, right, and the connectivity piece. The beauty of it is, though, we actually blend those two together. So not only do we provide the 24/7 support for the cellular side, but also for the security side as well, right? So that support extends across our entire portfolio of offerings so that, if something happens in the 3 o'clock hour and it's a critical site for you, we're able to have that support there for, really the entirety breadth of offerings that could be deployed at that site.
Yeah, we talked about a little bit about Starlink, or I'm sorry, it was mentioned on the slide earlier. Historically, we worked a lot with the high Earth orbit satellite systems, from Viasat and Hughes and Intelsat and some others, which were great back then. Today's environment with a lot of things going to cloud, being more latency sensitive, high Earth orbit just isn't fitting that need anymore. So we explored low Earth orbit, and there are three predominant companies, and SpaceX's Starlink was the first to commercially market a product for us to bring into our solution set. So we are an authorized solution provider with access to Starlink terminals and rate plans and those kinds of things. But this addresses a use case. We had a rural power company, and basically they just needed internet access on site for emergency phones. Their technicians were going out on site, and staff was going out on site. Their cell phones didn't work because it was literally that rural. There are no towers out there. And so we deployed Starlink, and they were able to have basically emergency call boxes at their locations, and be able to hook that network up, get that telemetry data flowing that historically they weren't able to bring into the system, as well as covering that safety element for the employees out there. So a really good use case. It was a good opening foray into Starlink and how we deploy specifically in the energy verticals. Very simple one to do, and I think it served a greater purpose for this company, and they seem to be very pleased with the outcome. So I think that's a great use case to mention here, as far as use cases for Starlink in general.
No, totally agree, Bo. So diving into active shooter location identification, right? I'll kind of pause here for a second as we kind of unpack what that means, right? So ideally, we're going to talk about two different aspects of it, right? We're going to talk about the actual gunshot happening itself, and then the identification and location piece of that gunshot, right? Being notified of a gunshot is fantastic as far as we heard one, right? But you look at the incident, say, even in North Carolina, a gunshot happened. Yes, we get that notification, but we have nothing to work off of, right? We have no evidence of where that shot came from, maybe who that shot came from, what car they were driving, anything to that degree. Going again back to what happened in North Carolina, for example, they still have not caught the suspect or suspects that that were part of that incident a couple of years ago. And so all they had to work off of was, a description of a minivan, which, is not entirely all that helpful. And unfortunately, still to this day, has not led to any kind of resolution in terms of, that suspect being captured. So the primary goal, right, of ASLI is for us to not only be able to pick up on that gunshot, but also then take a PTZ camera or a pan tilt zoom camera and go and find that subject where that shot came from. As we look at different types of gunshot solutions out there, right? Again, it's a hot topic given where we're at in the industry right now. You kind of have, in my opinion, three different tiers of gunshot detection. And as I kind of unpack that, we'll kind of walk through what those three tiers look like. At the kind of the lowest end of it, or the simplest end of it, you're looking at basically just a decibel level reading, right? You have even some cameras now that suggest that they can be a gunshot detection, AI, or a gunshot detection sensor, just as part of the audio profile of the microphone. That's just simply looking for a decibel level reading over, say, 130 or 140 decibels, right? It's not to the degree of any kind of analytical data or any actual gunshot data and gunshot profiles that we're looking for. So we might get false positives for a car backfiring, or for a tire popping, or somebody dropping two 2x4s together, for that an example, right? Any loud noises could at that point then trigger us to get a gunshot detection event, when in reality it could just lead us to have some false positives, right? We've all heard of the stories of the boy who cried wolf, right? Where eventually the monitoring center just ignored all of these alarms that were coming in daily because there were so many false positives, and finally they actually had an incident and ignored it because it was just another day and another alarm. So that's obviously what we're trying to avoid in any capacity, right? We do not want to be that boy who cried wolf, alarm that people begin to ignore. As we step into kind of the second tier, right, that's going to be our more robust actual gunshot detection sensors, right? And we pair our technology with one of these types of sensors, right? There's plenty of them out there that simply just offer detection of where the shot came, or sorry, that a shot was detected. It does take out that profile of what a gunshot sounds like, maybe what a projectile sounds like as it travels through the air, and does kick out those additional those car backfiring and the tire popping, stuff like that, fireworks for that matter. And so, that's going to be certainly a step in the right direction. But again, we have no visual evidence of where that shot came from. Some people on the call today, right, are not in urban area, or not in remote areas, and they're in a downtown environment, right? You get downtown Houston or downtown Oakland, or downtown anywhere that maybe there's active gunshots that may not be near or directed at our substation, but there's gunshots more than we would like to admit. And so, being able to identify if that was just a, way off in the distance type gunfire, or one that was, projected at our infrastructure is a key element of that as well. So as we kind of dive in then to, the kind of the top tier side of it, is being able to pair that great analysis of the gunshot and pair that with some location information as well with that PTZ camera. So that's going to give us the visual evidence of where that shot came from, be able to actually validate that this shot was legitimate, and ideally even get some additional information of who and where that shot came from. We can track the subject after the fact if they're driving a vehicle, pick up on their license plate, be able to give authorities that data almost instantaneously. I was lucky enough to be a part of a demonstration. Actually, Mackenzie, if you want to jump forward one slide and kind of talk through a little bit of that. I was lucky enough to be a part of a demonstration, for an active shooter demo that we provided. As much as I would love for it to be at a live, critical infrastructure site, obviously for purposes of safety, that wasn't the case. So we did it in a controlled environment, of course. But the neat aspect of it, right, is just how quickly we got that notification and visual confirmation of who and where that shot came from. Within 2 seconds of that gunshot coming off, we had a visual picture in our platform of that person taking that shot. At that point, all of our alarms went off. Our SOC was notified as well. We've got that visual evidence to work off of to be able to send to authorities, right? We're also going to get video of it, so then we'll track the subject after the fact. So in this case here, see a person walking off site. We've picked up on their vehicle, picked up on a plate, be able to give that to folks immediately. Let's say, for example, though, that we're not able to pick up on the plate. Heaven forbid someone's not honest, right? And takes their plate off, or he's using a fake plate or a paper plate for that matter. We're still going to be able to pick up on the make, model, and color of that vehicle through our AI. So pairing all these different kind of pieces of technology together allow us to get a much better picture in a much shorter amount of time frame as soon as an incident happens. I was speaking with a friend of mine who's an officer in the greater Dallas area in Texas, and they had recently installed several license plate recognition cameras all throughout their city. And his main purpose for them going with some of that type of technology across the city is that in the event of an incident, they say that they have a much greater chance, upwards of 80% chance of actually capturing a suspect within a 5-minute time frame of the incident. As soon as they get beyond that 10, 15, 20-minute time frame after an incident, it becomes much, much harder, and the percentages become much, much lower as far as actually catching that suspect. And so being able to provide all the data as quickly as possible to authorities, especially in the event of a critical incident such as a gunshot, is really the key element that we're looking for here. So we have all this great data, we have all this great technology at the field. What do we do with it, right? Some of you on the call today have a security operations center, right? You have your own SOC that can monitor these. Others of you on the call don't have that, right? And you're wondering, how am I going to take all this technology? I'm not staying up all night to monitor it. I don't want my phone blowing up. What's going to go for, how are we going to address that? So a few things that we'll talk about are going to be the ability to have remote monitoring services, right? One of the great things that we bring to the table is having our own in-house security operations center, where we can respond to those incidences on your behalf and either respond directly to authorities or respond to your nighttime supervisor, for example. Right, we work hand in hand with a lot of our customers' SOC centers that maybe can't handle the load of 20, 30, 40, 500 cameras deployed in the field. Their SOC today can't handle that load, so they even will have us work with them in hand and be able to provide that information to them when a breach or when something is happening at a site that that we're being notified on. As we talk about some autonomous actions, right? Obviously, being proactive in nature is going to be much better than being reactive in nature. So what are some things that we can do to be proactive in that regard? Just as kind of using some examples per se, we'll look at if a vehicle is detected, right? Maybe I'm going to turn the lights on at a substation. Or if a human is detected and has breached the fence line, I'm going to have the voice down go off and say, you are trespassing, right? I'm not going to have any kind of human intervention necessarily in that regard, should I choose not to. Or I'm going to have the ability to be alerted nearly instantaneously of somebody on my site and be able to take action on that. Am I close enough to town that I believe that I can get a law enforcement to respond in a timely manner? Great, let's try to apprehend the subject. Am I 20, 30 minutes outside of town and I want to just get the person off my site? Fantastic. I'll go ahead and voice them down, turn the lights on, and use my pan tilt zoom camera to get some actual good evidence of the person or the vehicle they were driving to send to law enforcement after the fact. Kenzie, if you want to jump forward one slide. So as we talk about kind of integrating this into your existing suite of solutions today, right? Majority of folks on the call, right, will have some level of SCADA system today, but may not have some level of security system today. The beauty of the different pieces of technology that we bring to the table is being able to integrate with some of those existing solutions. We've talked about, obviously, maybe some of those proactive approaches with humans and vehicles, but what about gunshot detection, right? Maybe your dispatch or your operations centers are not going to be the ones responsible for security monitoring, but they for sure want to know about a gunshot. We could automatically pump in a gunshot detection event into the SCADA system. So it comes through as a normal alarm, right? Because obviously a gunshot detected is going to be, one of the most critical types of alarms we're going to receive on the utility side. And let the monitoring team or another group of the SOC handle the traditional human vehicle alarms. So again, I previously mentioned how we're using security technology and cameras for other aspects of the operations, right? And the ways that we can do that are really, a multitude of different ways, right? We've talked a little bit about safety, having the ability to do posture detection, right? So if somebody were to fall over in or pass out within a substation or get electrocuted, we would be able to detect on that person being on the ground and be able to alert on that just through the camera, right? No additional sensors, no need for additional kind of oversight in that regard. The camera itself could act as our security camera and as well as a safety camera and alert our team accordingly. Using thermal cameras, right? Thermal cameras, I think, always came with the notion of a really high price tag, right? Some of you today use the really high-end FLIR cameras on a monthly basis to perform inspections of substations or inspections of operations equipment. And yes, some of those cameras can cost 5 figures, sometimes even 6 figures. Luckily, for the purposes of security and what we're able to deploy in the field today, the cost of those thermal cameras has come down substantially, giving us the ability to leverage them as security cameras for maybe a little bit larger stretches of fence line, but also use them for other aspects such as temperature monitoring as well. So in this case here, you'll see on the screen, we're actually using this camera for 2 different things: breaching of a site, and also monitoring if any of our equipment is beginning to overheat. And so that way we're able to use it, for multiple aspects of the organization. And obviously on the operations side, if something begins to overheat, that could be a huge detriment to our operations as far as even, up to and including shutting down a site.
Mm-hmm.
Leveraging, the PTZ cameras or the pan tilt zoom cameras for inspections of sites pre-trip, right? Had one customer that had, some locations out roughly 2 hours away from their headquarters building, and numerous times would they have to send a lineman out to go figure out what was going on, only to realize that they didn't bring the right part, right? So maybe being able to use a PTZ camera before going on site, verify that they had everything they needed before they left site, making sure they don't have to do a second round trip just to perform the repairs.
So kind of rounding back through everything that we talked about up to this point, taking that proactive approach, we're reducing or eliminating those safety concerns, those risks to not only the infrastructure, but the employees, the staff, and really kind of ensuring faster response times, less downtime. All of those things play into this. And obviously, there is a financial impact. The downtime from any kind of damage or anything that could be prevented has a dollar value behind it. And I think, individually, everyone looks at that differently. But I think there are some pretty standardized metrics there as you start, moving column A to column B. The costs add up pretty quickly. So that financial impact is a big one. And, again, who can put a price on a life if something isn't being done properly? Those disruptions, as Colin mentioned earlier, the PR, the optics of some of these things can really either increase trust and use and positive, kind of a positive outlook of what the company's doing and where they're going, or it can have the polar opposite effect. And in today's world, that can actually shut companies down. Bad PR, social media, all of that press can really lead to bad situations for the companies, can lead up to lawsuits. And again, it goes back to that financial impact and those things. So really getting ahead of that piece of it as well. And then, as far as like increased future costs go, to be able to use these systems and perform some of these preventative maintenance operations remotely, to perform this monitoring remotely, to know where the system stands is to protect the site. All of that plays into avoiding future costs down the road. So, we could forecast maybe what would happen if the network was down. All of the hardware, the transformers have a lifespan. That's all built in, but it's these unplanned for events that may not be in budgets for the operator, this particular operator, and really kind of reducing those unplanned for expenses in your budgeting, those kinds of things. Just overall, being more proactive about the security of a site, about the information that you have, about the network of grid or the pipeline, whatever the case may be, just kind of that future look and really staying ahead of things. And I think that's kind of in our ethos, is to try to be proactive in all the business we do, and hopefully that resonates with everyone on the call today, taking that proactive approach as well. Did I miss anything on that, Colin, that you'd want to touch on?
I don't think so. I think you definitely kind of walked through, right, of where we can see these benefits. And I think the goal of today, right, is to kind of just highlight the fact that security cameras, to a degree, right, that traditional word that we'll use, don't just have to be used for that reactive nature, right? That they can actually be a forceful, impactful tool for really trying to improve our overall operations, improve our safety, and improve the security of our sites as well, right? So certainly hope that we've kind of been able to drive that point across as you take some of this information back to your teams.
Yeah, then just kind of a quick shout out to the various client companies that we work with today. I think there's a lot of brands that we all recognize on there, and maybe some that aren't as familiar. Really broad scope, broad spectrum of clients in our portfolio who are either in the space that you're in today or adjacent, or totally in a different area together. They might be in retail space, but to show and illustrate that we are well equipped to work with everything from smaller business all the way up to enterprise and operator level. As you can see here, work very closely with a lot of these companies, and they seem to be happy with us. We keep adding more business, so it's been a really good relationship, and that's the important piece, is building those relationships and delivering those services and outcomes.
Most definitely. So, Mackenzie, maybe in the essence of time, we jump over to some time for some Q&A. So for those on the call, feel free to drop some questions in the chat box or in the Q&A section there. Mackenzie, I know you've kind of got this portion handled, so I'll let you jump back in real quick.
Yep, absolutely perfect. And we do have a couple of questions. Let me just pull up over here on my other screen. Okay, so first question, do you provide site design services or just the software?
Bo, you want me to take that, or since you're a solution engineer, maybe we'll let you take that one?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and respond to that, and then Colin, feel free to fill anything there. Yes, the short answer is yes. We work very closely, in that discovery phase all the way through implementation, and oftentimes there are designs or design work to be done by our teams. It's obviously a cooperative effort, so the more information we get, the easier it is to get that, the quicker we can turn those things around. But helping with design work is kind of part and parcel of the solution sets. Obviously there's some parameters around that. It has to be within scope, and we have to agree upon the scope of the design and those kinds of things. But we are here to help our partners, our clients, through the entire process.
Awesome. Oh, go ahead.
To piggyback on Bo's comment, I think one of the things that I love kind of about the two companies, right, coming together, going back to the 2020 and Epic Energies, is that we do have that expertise, that field expertise on our teams to be able to, think of designs that may be a little out of the box, right? Not every solution is cookie cutter. Not every solution is a one size fits all. There are challenges that each different customer has and each different industry has that may need a little bit of tweaks, right? And so one thing that I'm super excited about is we're being able to take kind of both of those areas, in that capacity and be able to, take those designs and that knowledge base to create, even, some one-off solutions for customers that really help their business.
Awesome. Love it. Okay. Another question we had, can you work with existing cameras?
Yes, Bo, I'll take that one for a minute. You
Okay.
can tell me if I say anything wrong in that capacity. So the short answer is yes. There's a few caveats to that, right? As we look at certain different pieces of technology and cameras as far as it relates to compliance, especially NDAA compliance. But a big aspect in that is yes, right? We are not a group that's going to come in and have to rip and replace every single type of hardware. We can sit atop your existing infrastructure, whether it's using your existing cameras or even sit atop your existing VMS type software as well. We're able to deploy a lot of our different AI feature sets on top of those existing systems today. So if you need to deploy new systems, as Bo mentioned, we're here for that. We'll help design those sites. If you have an existing system that's maybe just lacking in functionality and don't want to do a full rip and replace, then fantastic. We can work with you in that regard as well and simply layer in on top of your existing infrastructure.
Awesome. I am not seeing any other questions. Oh, actually, maybe one more. Oh, someone asked if we can send the slide deck. Absolutely. So after this, I will send out the recording of this webinar as well as a PDF version of this deck within that follow-up. So absolutely no problem there. So I am not seeing any other questions. I don't know if you guys want to quickly kind of review those kind of couple of use cases with the 3 minutes we have left, or up to you guys.
Yeah, let's for those that don't mind sticking on for 3 more minutes. We've got a couple of different use cases just to talk about. Let's take a look at the fire detection one.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe if I can jump over here.
So one of the neat pieces and we'll kind of maybe highlight this one and one other before wrapping up, is fire detection, right? So as we've talked about some, let's say basic forms of AI, human vehicle detection, license plate recognition. But what about fire detection, right? Traditionally maybe you had to use a thermal camera to detect on hot spots. But you'll see here in this video, as this area of trash and garbage and maybe used batteries and junk began smoking, we see here that the fire started and we were able to pick up on that fire and do an early detection on that, right? I think in this exact scenario, customer was able to have the fire department notified within several minutes, as opposed to having an entire facility burned to the ground before they figure out that there was a fire, right? So these early warning abilities through the existing infrastructure you may have today are just another aspect of what we're able to do with a camera that maybe traditionally couldn't have been done. So, here what we'll kind of highlight as it relates to, site security. You'll see a lot of different bounding boxes here. And the one thing I'd like to highlight as it relates to the different bounding boxes is the priority level that we can set with those different bounding boxes. So the far left perimeter zone, they're still outside my fence line. I'm not too concerned. I want to be alerted about it, but I'm not taking action on it. Maybe that one inside zone, that inner zone there, I am beginning to take action. Okay, now they've breached my perimeter and I need to be alarmed on that a little bit more heavily. Let's say, though, they finally enter into this kind of central area where all of my copper is at, all of my high-end material. That's going to be automatically voicing down. That's going to be automatically, turning lights on or a strobe light on, right? And so in that capacity here, these different areas allow us to have different actions based on where somebody is at within the camera view. It's not just hey, motion was detected and this is my one size fits all alarm for that. We could have 4 or 5 different styles of alarms just within a singular camera. Bo, did I miss anything in that one?
No, I think that was great. I mean, some of the other things like along the fence line, we have a pathway there as well. So not only is that a perimeter, but it's also a clear area where things shouldn't be stored. So multiple use cases. But I always love to see our bounding boxes and tracklet IDs. I like it when we expose that information in the video display. It's really cool to see kind of how the AI is looking at that scene and making those determinations. So that's really cool. Thank you for showing that.
Well, I think
Awesome.
that will probably cover us
Yep, I think
for
so.
now. I know we're right at time, so.
Yep. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining. We really appreciate it. We know you're all extremely busy, so thank you for choosing to spend your morning or your early afternoon with us. As I mentioned, we will be sending out the recording of the webinar and a PDF of this slide deck as well. So be on the lookout for that in the next couple of days, and have a wonderful rest of your Thursday. And again, thanks for joining.